You're listening to the Warriors of Dystonia Podcast, a podcast sharing the stories and journeys of people whose lives are affected by dystonia. My name is Carl and I'm the creator of Warriors of Dystonia. I've had dystonia since 2007 and I started this project to spread awareness of the condition. Each podcast will be a chat with someone who either has dystonia, cares for someone with dystonia, a representative from a dystonia charity, or perhaps a dystonia specialist. Warriors of Dystonia is all about awareness. The following podcast is with my friend Lindsay from North Carolina, a passionate and caring advocate determined to spread awareness of dystonia, being there for anyone that needs her, and being a true dystonia warrior. This is Lindsay's journey.
When I was younger, I had challenges writing. I would press down really hard and it would hurt my entire arm and shoulder and right side of my neck. I'm right-handed. And I always heard the term writer's cramp and just assumed that that's what I had. And people here in America apparently use that very loosely. So I just chalked it up to I have writer's cramp. But I never had control of how hard I was holding a writing utensil. And I had to think really hard when I was using writing utensils to not hold it so tight, and I didn't have control over it. So if I started consciously thinking about it, obviously I couldn't write what I needed to write because I was concentrating so hard on loosening my grip so I wouldn't hurt throughout the process. So it wasn't until I was diagnosed with dystonia that I realized, oh, I actually had writer's cramp that whole time. When people said, oh, my hand hurts, I just assumed I was experiencing what they were experiencing, but I was not, because again, everything would be inflamed. Even just gripping an object for a long time, I would realize I would grip it so tight, my knuckles would become white. And my arm, my shoulder, my neck would just be in pain to the point later on it would be dead weight and heavy and I could barely even move my arm. So I was very physical growing up, played lots of sports, but stayed away from sports that required a lot of gripping. So I tried out tennis, but realized I didn't like that because it caused me physical pain. I did baseball, t-ball, coach pitch, again, gripping the bat, gripping the ball, it just physically hurt me. So I stuck to swimming and soccer. I did gymnastics. But it was very interesting when I was finally diagnosed with dystonia that I had had it all my life. And then I found myself kind of getting a little frustrated that people use writer's cramp so loosely, at least here in America. And now I'm trying to advocate, please don't say you have writer's cramp because your hand might just be hurting you from writing, but writer's cramp is much more than your hand just hurting. I also was told all my life, stop pressing down so hard because you could read my writing through at least probably about 5 pages. If I had papers under it, that's how hard I would press down. But again, I had no control over it. And if I tried to control it, then my writing just looked horrible. So that was, I guess, when it really all started, but I didn't know that I had it. And then I also had something called myoclonus that, again, I didn't realize that's what I had until all this came about, which is another term for myoclonic jerks. I just always thought I was clumsy. And so every once in a while, maybe about 3 times a week, I would just, all of a sudden, things would just fly out of my hands, or I would just jerk. And I'd just jokingly, because that's how some of us cope with things, say, oh, I just had a miniature seizure. And of course, people would look at me and think, what an awful thing to say about yourself. And again, I've had seizure-like activity, so I'm not trying to downplay anybody that has seizures, but it was embarrassing. So the only thing I could do was try to add some humor to it, because some people would, because one day I was eating and a fork literally just flew out of my hand because I spazzed out. And and I don't embarrass easy, but when you lack control and you don't know it's coming, it's embarrassing. I could never habituate to it because I never knew when it was coming. So it's not something I could feel coming and try to stop it. So when I was first diagnosed, because of my myoclonus and because of my writer's cramp, they thought, oh, maybe it's progressed and you have myoclonus dystonia, which is genetic. Well, I got genetically tested, and ironically, it came back negative. So I'm one of the few that have myoclonus separate from dystonia. So I have both of them, but it's not genetic and it's not connected. So that's been interesting, because if I had myoclonus dystonia, I would be a candidate for deep brain stimulation. But because I don't have it, I guess I'm no longer a candidate, or that's what I've been told here in America. But also back in 2013, again, I don't know, because even using a mouse can cause my writer's cramp to kick in, because again, I'm gripping something. And typing sometimes can cause it as well. Just anything using my right hand, basically. So in 2013, I had been asked by my head of school, since I'm a teacher, to create a summer program, a literacy-based summer program. And so I was working on typing up all my lesson plans for, at the time, I think it was an 8-week summer program. And my whole shoulder, neck got so tense, and I went to pop it, and apparently gave myself whiplash, because that's how tight it was. And I'm not one to ask for help, or I don't like taking medication, because I took medication from the time I was 7 until I was 17, because I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, dyslexia, and ADHD in 3rd grade. So I just dealt with it. But then it got so bad that, and this was probably a few weeks, I just dealt with the pain, and finally my right hand went numb. And I thought, oh, that's not good. I can't type while my hand is numb. So I called my mom, because my husband was at work, and I said, Mom, something's not right. Something's wrong. Like my right hand is going numb, and I got to work. I got to type my lesson plans. So she came and got me and took me to urgent care. And the doctor diagnosed me with whiplash. And he said, have you been in an accident? And I said, no, I just tried popping my neck. And he looked at me like I was crazy. But that's how tight my muscles had just gotten, to where I was so surprised that I had done that to myself. But ever since then, I think that just created, a spiral effect. Everything just continued to get worse. In 2017, I was put on a particular medication that I apparently should not have been put on, because I have a history of migraines, both hemiplegic migraines, which I've learned not a lot of people are familiar with. They are similar to a stroke. They resemble a stroke. So my left side of my body would just basically stop working. My face would sag. I wouldn't be able to speak properly. Well, this medication I shouldn't have been on, because it could have migraines. So I started to have a series of hemiplegic migraines, basically one after another, and it took them a while to realize, oh, it's your medication and you shouldn't be on it. So I finally got taken off that medication, but to be honest, I think the damage was done. My brain was not happy with me at all, because in 2018, I had another hemiplegic migraine and called my husband. I wasn't coherent. He couldn't understand what I was saying, but by the time he got to me, it had kind of lifted, but I told him something's still not right. I don't feel right. Where before I would just deal with it And of course, it would be scary, but I just go on with my life. But this time I told him, I think I need help. I don't quite feel right. So he took me to urgent care, and they were very kind and very cautious and said, I think you're right. I think it's just a hemiplegic migraine, but to be on the safe side, let's get you to the ER. And because it might maybe have been a stroke, even though we don't think so, but just as a to take, precautionary measures, you're going to be put in the ambulance and your husband can follow in his vehicle. And I said, okay. Well, no sooner than the doors to the ambulance shut, my left leg just all of a sudden flew up in the air. And I looked at the EMT, which is the emergency medical technician, like, what in the hell? And then all of a sudden, my right leg flew up. And then my arms started flailing. And then my whole body just started convulsing and coming off the gurney. And I was looking at him, and I told him, I'm trying to stop it. I don't know what's going on. And apparently he gave me some type of tranquilizer or anti-seizure medicine, but I was still apparently jerking throughout, because by the time my husband got to the ER and walked into my room, I was unconscious due to the medication, but I kind of came to, and apparently I was still convulsing. It just wasn't nearly as bad, but I still had uncontrollable movements. And he, of course, walked in and was like, what the is wrong with my wife? And they just nonchalantly, as they should, because they're trying to keep people calm, said, oh, she's having a seizure. And he said, well, why is she having a seizure? What's going on? And of course, they told me to see a neurologist, but I'm stubborn, and I was supposed to go to Vegas with my mom that weekend. And so I was determined to go to Vegas with my mom. It was my birthday weekend, actually. And I think that happened on a Thursday, and she and I think, either left on a Friday or Saturday. And I went to Vegas, and I had no residual side effects other than just being extremely sore. Because literally it feels as if when I have those dystonic storms, which I didn't know that's what it was until later, I feel like as if it's radiating from my stomach, as if someone's punching me constantly in my stomach, causing me to flail. And other than being sore, I didn't have residual side effects. So I went on with my life. In 2019, I believe in February, I started having a lot of tremors, internal tremors and external tremors. And I told my husband, I said, something's not right. I don't feel right. And of course, everybody kept chalking it up to anxiety, because yes, I've suffered with anxiety, but I said, no, this is different. This isn't anxiety tremors. This is something completely different. I know what anxiety is. I've had 2 panic attacks before. None of this is anxiety or panic attack related. And I think that was a precursor to what was going to happen to me in a few months, because no sooner than all that started happening and spiraling out of control, in September of 2019, I got in a car wreck, and the guy hit me, rear-ended me, totaled my car, and then 2 weeks later, I had my second dystonic storm. Now, again, we don't know if those are related, but I did hit my head on the back of my seat, because I kind of crouched down and braced myself because I saw him coming, and he probably hit me going 30 to 40 miles an hour. And I do remember seeing stars. And the neurologist doesn't know, because he kind of feels like if it was related to the car wreck, that it would have happened sooner. But also because of my history, it could have also, I was just kind of predisposed, I guess, for it to potentially happen. So I had my second and worst dystonic storm in September of 2019. Again, I had a migraine, but this time it was just a visual migraine. I popped some migraine medication, over-the-counter migraine medication, laid down for a bit, contacted my boss that I'd be late, contacted my husband that I'd be late dropping my son off with him, because my husband works at a school that my son goes to. And just rested for a bit because when I have the visual migraines, I literally can't see very well. Everything's cut in half. So I waited for the medicine to kick in and then said, all right, let's go. I'm good to go. I got to go to work. And about, I would say, 5 miles down the road, I all of a sudden got this hot flash and just felt extremely weird and knew something wasn't right. And I pulled over, and I believe my son was 4 or 5 at the time. He was 5 at the time. Of course, he knows the route, right? So he's like, Mom, what are you doing? Where are you going? This isn't where you turn. And I'm trying to stay calm, but my body was already starting to begin to convulse. And I was like, Darren, just let me do what I need to do. Well, this time it took the previous dystonic storm, I could talk and I was aware until, of course, they gave me whatever they gave me to knock me out. But this time I was actually going in and out of consciousness because the muscles were constricting so hard around my lungs that I just wasn't getting the oxygen I need. Because some people you talk to are like, oh, dystonic storms don't cause you to pass out. And I beg to differ. My mind that time made me go in and out of consciousness. And I would just remember coming into consciousness being like, and all of a sudden it would start happening again. But fortunately, I was able to pull over. I got my phone out, but I was having a really hard time using it because my hands were shaking so bad. And this time it affected my voice. So it was constricting my voice box, my throat. And all I could get out was the street I had pulled off of. So my poor husband jumped in his car and drove down the street, and he said he stopped at every side street trying to find me. And by the time he found me, I was just flailing back and forth. My poor son was strapped in his car seat, and in America, we have something called a 5-point harness. So he could undo the strap at his chest, but he couldn't get the red button push that goes between their legs to get to me. And it was interesting because we had watched a movie earlier, and it scared him. And I told him, sometimes when things scare you, the best thing to do if you can't get away is to close your eyes and ears, and then you won't hear. Because as you know, you like horror films, the music adds to it, right? So my voice finally did come back to me, and I was able to quickly tell him, close your eyes, shut your ears, like just, And later he admitted to me, he's like, Mommy, I just couldn't do it. I just had to watch you. He said, but I'm so sorry that I couldn't get to you and help you. And I said, it's okay. But my husband was shocked, and we both regret that he didn't record that one, because again, that was the worst one. But he, as you know, with people with seizures, same with people with dystonic storms, you're not supposed to strap them down, but he had to restrain me because I was flailing forward so bad that he was scared I was going to whack my head on the steering wheel. So he kind of had his arm just across my chest, but again, not holding me down, but just trying to prevent me from flinging forward. And it was very interesting because they've all lasted about an hour. And so by the time the paramedics showed up, they asked me what drugs I was on, if I've ever had panic attacks, because of course I couldn't breathe well. And that just really irritated me because I've had a panic attack before. I wasn't on drugs, and I was told I was having seizures. And so I believed them because I didn't know any better. I was taken to the hospital. They finally took me serious, though, because I started having seizure-like activities. So that was, I have posted on my Dystonia Dame Instagram account of what they call faux seizures. They're not technically real seizures because up epileptic seizures are 3 to 5 minutes long. You're unconscious. You urinate and defecate on yourself potentially. And I was having none of that, but I was having some type of similar thing to a seizure in addition to my dystonic storm. And they had seen that my second one, they had set me up. They said, hey, you've been here before. Did you ever see a neurologist? And I said, no. So this time they told me, you're not leaving without being scheduled to see a neurologist because this is your second seizure. You need to see a neurologist. And so they scheduled my appointment for the neurologist. So I had no say on who I was seeing, what day, what time, nothing. They scheduled it for me. My third dystonic storm happened at work, unfortunately. They all seemed to happen in the early morning. My second dystonic storm, I did have residual side effects. I never was able to stop moving after that. We went to the neurologist. She was very off-putting. She thought for some reason I was there because of migraines. I took my husband with me, of course, because I can't really see what's going on when that's happening. He can. So he was describing my movements to her, how I was twisting and contorting and how I was having difficulty breathing. Sometimes I couldn't even talk. And she just nonchalantly said, oh, that's dystonia, but I don't know why you have dystonia. She said, we'll schedule you for EEG. Well, that was October 7th, I believe. And she scheduled the EEG for the 17th. And I kept telling her, but I'm still moving. Like, I feel like people are pushing me. I can't walk straight. And again, she just kept talking about my migraines. So I left there feeling very defeated. She gave me no literature on dystonia. I was quite frankly disappointed, confused, frustrated, how we all, I'm sure, have felt. And that's what makes us, even though our stories are different, I think that's our commonality, is the feeling of defeat and frustration and confusion and loneliness. So I just started researching dystonia myself and came across the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation. I decided to make a page dedicated to my dystonia to try to find other people like me, because again, I had no clue what was going on. And so that happened on a Monday with that first neurologist. Well, by Friday, I had my third dystonic storm and was taken to the hospital again. And they saw in my file that I had a scheduled EEG. So they finally took me seriously, solely because they saw in my file that I had a scheduled EEG, and they admitted me to the hospital. And again, ironically, this was my birthday weekend, just 2 years later. So it also happens around my birthday. And so that was in 2019. And so they gave me an EEG, and they, of course, didn't find dystonia, because you can't find dystonia, as we know, on an EEG or MRI. I watched a webinar through Dystonia Medical Research Foundation that they're now able to see certain types on PET scans. But of course, they didn't find the dystonia, but they found my myoclonic jerks. And that's when I finally learned, oh, I'm not clumsy. I actually have myoclonus. Interesting. That's when I was diagnosed with that, which again, I've had all my life. They wanted to keep me, that was a 24-hour EEG. They wanted to keep me, I'm stubborn. My mom was nice enough to have gotten me a hotel room in Asheville so I could spend time with my cousin and her family for my birthday. And I told them I was leaving. I said, you got your 24-hour EEG? You know, the dystonic storm is done. It's over. I'm out of here. And they said, we usually don't, because by then it's like 5 o'clock in the evening. So I spent Friday to Saturday night. And I said, again, I have a hotel that's already paid for. I'm out. So, you know, discharge me now. And they said, we usually don't discharge people this late, especially after an incident you've had. You've gone through some trauma. We need you to stay again. And I said, where's the paperwork? I said, I will file that I'm being discharged against medical advice. I'm going. Well, looking back now, I probably should not have, because and again, this is not to be demeaning by any sense, but I'm just trying to give people a visual. Those in the dystonia community that have seen the poster of the man that has a certain look to him and a certain walk, that was me. I could not walk in a straight line. My body was moving all over the place. My myoclonic jerks were worse. I just thought, wow, because apparently they drugged me up. So when I told them I was ready to go, it's because I felt quote unquote normal. But once those drugs wore off, I realized, wow, I'm not quote unquote normal anymore. I am really bad off. This is awful. I couldn't even hardly sleep because my head just kept moving. My body was twitching nonstop. Fortunately, since again I'm stubborn, I told them, send the drugs you're giving me to Asheville. I'll pick them up at the pharmacy there. But it ended up being a Sunday and the pharmacy didn't open until later in the day. So I got the medication. Fortunately, it was fast acting, and I was finally able to stop moving and walk straight. And I hadn't been able to do that from September 26th until that was October 12th, around there. So fortunately, not too long compared to most people. I'm really grateful for that. But at the same time, it just was getting progressively worse. And it's very interesting because if you read and talk to certain people, they're like, oh, dystonia doesn't progress. But I've realized it has, because again, I had writer's cramp. And then I started having dystonic storms. Then I started having full body. It affected my entire body to where I couldn't walk. So yes, it did progress for me. I would love to think that it wouldn't progress for other people, and I hope it doesn't. But for me, it did. Since that first neurologist completely dismissed me, I refused to see her again. And when I called to change, they told me I couldn't, because for some reason with insurance in America, they want you to stay with the same person. And I told them, she told me I have dystonia. She's not a movement specialist. So I'd already started researching, so I knew what to say. I said, I need to see someone who is an expert in movement disorders. She is not. She is just a neurologist that does not specialize in movement disorders. I deserve to see someone. So I had to fight for it. So they sent me to my second neurologist that was specialized in movement disorders. Well, for some reason, he did the best he could, I think, but later he moved. So I think he had already checked out. He was in the process of moving. I didn't get that much from him other than, yes, you have dystonia. We don't know why. I tried to do the genetic testing, continued to wait for months and months. Finally, he said, you know what? I'm going to send you to another movement specialist. Unfortunately, he's 3 hours away from me. So then I got sent to my third neurologist, who is awesome and I adore. And of course, I had to basically start all over again with my story. And something I did fail to mention, which Dystonia Medical Research Foundation has done some research on, is that I have always loved to drink. And some of that is genetic, and some of that is just me. And my husband even made the point, you know what? Most people get clumsier when they drink. He said, but you stop running into things. And so when I talked to my second neurologist, I had admitted to him I drink quite a bit, especially in the summers because I'm a teacher and I have summers off. And of course, I'm just chilling, sitting by the pool. And I said, but when school starts back, I'm a responsible, productive citizen. I'll stop drinking so heavily and, do what I need. And he looked at me and said, because again, at the time they thought I had myoclonus dystonia, even though I hadn't been tested for it yet. He said, well, you know what? You could have shocked your body into having these dystonic storms because alcohol actually helps people with myoclonus. And if you cut back the alcohol, you could have triggered these dystonic storms without meaning to. And I was like, wow, that's insane. And what's crazy now is I can't even drink because of the medication I'm on, because it can either metabolize it to where I can OD, or it can metabolize it to where it won't even work. And after seeing how my body reacts without the medication, even though it was a short time from September 26th to October something, I do not want to be like that again. Because again, I couldn't even walk. I couldn't sleep because my body wouldn't stop moving. I just literally felt like someone was pushing me around all day, and it was very awkward and weird. There would be times I would talk to people, and all of a sudden I would step back, and I would play it off as if I meant to step back, but I didn't. It was as somebody just came up and pushed me. And I believe, for me at least, dystonia is comorbid because my anxiety became worse, and it was more challenging for me to be able to self-regulate the physiological effects. And of course, I've had anxiety all my life, and I was able to regulate it. But this made it so much more challenging to regulate, and I became easily overwhelmed. At the time, I was working with 3 to 6 year olds, and I love my children, but anytime they got a little loud or startled me by accident, my startle reflex was more intense. It was just very overwhelming. And my poor son, I would be easily overwhelmed by his hyperactivity. He's very active and hyper and talkative, much like myself. But I couldn't regulate that. And that was an awful feeling. And I was trying to explain to people, I can't regulate that anymore. Why can't I regulate that? I've worked so hard all my life, and I'm in my late 30s. And now all of a sudden I can't regulate it. And so that was a defeated feeling. And I also began to have what some people have told me, and again, I haven't been officially diagnosed, but POTS, to where I would wake up and immediately feel like I was going to pass out just from flipping over in my bed. And again, I talked to doctors, and they said, "Oh, that's just anxiety." I'm like, "How can that be anxiety? I just woke up. I haven't even thought about anything yet to cause me to be anxious." And then I was always a morning person. So all this has completely changed my life, because now when I get up in the mornings, I have to do it very slowly, or I feel like I'm going to pass out. I used to literally be able to sit up and jump out of bed and go. And now I have to lay here or lie here for a little bit and just like get my body acclimated. And then I have to sit up slowly. Then I have to stand up slowly. And working with young children, I'm always squatting and then getting up and bending down. And I have to be very conscientious of that now. And of course, my myoclonus and my migraines became more frequent and intense. Also was told that I potentially have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I gave myself the test for that, because you can test yourself, and I scored a 9 out of 10. And some people that I've met that also have dystonia also have HEDS. And unfortunately, there's no specialist with POTS or EDS locally. The closest one is 3 to 4 hours away for HEDS, and then the other one is for POTS is about, I think, 2 hours away, which is really ironic because I live in one of the biggest cities out of 3 states that we don't have that locally. I just don't understand. So I'm still trying to figure out if I have POTS and if I have HEDS. I think if I can find out if I have that, that would be more helpful too, and kind of give me a reason why I potentially have this. My current and third neurologist believes that I either have the idiopathic or functional dystonia, meaning the idiopathic, it's secondary, they'll never know why I have it. And then the functional is more of due to anxiety and stuff. But I've told them, when all this started, I was the least anxious in my life. I was the least stressed in my life. But I also know the brain can't decipher between a little bit of stress or a lot of stress. Stress is stress. So I would like to think that I would just prefer it to be idiopathic. I don't know, it's still a hard pill to swallow to think that I could potentially have some control over it if I just reduced my anxiety some. Because again, there's been a lot in my life that has happened that has caused an enormous amount of anxiety and stress. And this didn't happen to me. It happened to me when I was probably the happiest moments in my life. So it's all been very confusing. I joke too that like my left side, I'm a Libra, so I joke that I need to be balanced. So the left side of my body is the hemiplegic side and the right side's my dystonic side because it needs to be balanced. But lately, my left hand has started to go numb. My left foot has started to go numb. So that's something else I'm trying to figure out. My left foot has also started to turn inwards. So again, I think things are progressing. I would love to manage this without medication, but just from that short period from my first dystonic storm or second and worst dystonic storm on September 26, 2019 until I got my medication in kind of mid-October, I wasn't able to function normally. Like I said, I couldn't even walk very well. But once that medication hit, I was able to function, and I thought, wow. And I've always been opposed to medication because I was on it from the time I was 7 to 17 and just want to be quote unquote normal. But I've realized for me to be normal, I have to take this medication. I'm hoping that I can maybe try not to be on it at some point, but this whole pandemic outbreak has obviously not helped any of us with chronic illnesses because everything's been put on hold. So I haven't been able to get all the other tests I need. I finally was able to see my third and hopefully final neurologist via virtual meetings. I've had great support system through some of my friends. Andrew was one of the first people that welcomed me to the dystonia world. I met Beth at a dystonia seminar in Atlanta, and she was the first person that I met in face-to-face that welcomed me and has helped me a lot as well. She's the one that actually dropped the HEDS on me, which I had no clue what that was, but when she started talking to me about it, I said, oh my goodness, yes, I can do all that. I have all that. And she said, see, I'm diagnosing you. And I said, yes. And so it's just been amazing to make all these connections that I've had all of this probably all my life. But yeah, my mom, dad, and husband have been very helpful and supportive. I try not to talk about it too much in front of my son just because when I talk about it, he remembers what happens in the car and gets very upset. My mom sent me to a integrative medicine doctor. I took the dystonia genetic panel, and again, everything came back negative, even for the DOPA responsive dystonia. She gave me a full genetic test that had nothing to do with dystonia. And interesting enough, my dopamine was low. And as we know, there is a relationship between dopamine and dystonia too. So it was interesting to me that the genetic panel for dystonia came back negative for dopamine responsive dystonia, but yet my other genetic testing shows that I am not able to produce enough dopamine. So I sent all those results to my neurologist, and I'm hoping that, maybe that will help, because I was also extremely low in vitamin D. And growing up in America, I grew up with these got milk commercials for bone health. And so I just always was under the false impression that vitamin D was for your bones. Well, come to find out, once I did more research, it's also for your brain. When I went to the integrative medicine doctor, she was extremely upset that I was deficient in vitamin D, and none of my neurologists, my primary care physician, none of them had put me on supplements. She goes, here you have a neurological disorder. You have low vitamin D. At your age, you should have 60, whatever it is, 60 points or whatever, however they measure it. And you are at 29. You need supplements. Vitamin D is very vital to your brain. I've been so grateful for her because she's put me on all these amazing supplements, and it's actually really helped. She takes a more holistic approach, had me test my gut surprisingly, I scored a 10 out of 10 for gut inflammation. So everything, again, started to kind of make sense because she said your gut is connected to your brain. A lot of people don't realize that, but whatever's happening in your gut is going to affect your brain. The medication I was put on, Klonopin, it was not lasting very long. And my neurologist was surprised because he said it's fast acting and long lasting, but now it makes sense because with my gut inflammation, I was not able to metabolize stuff correctly. So she said I was eating, but I was malnourished, like I wasn't getting any nutrients. So that also means I wasn't metabolizing the medication properly. So she's trying to help me build my gut back up to a healthy range so I can metabolize my medication properly and so I can metabolize my food properly. So it's just been very interesting journey because there's all these connections. Caffeine used to do nothing for me. I could drink caffeine and fall asleep. Now I can't consume caffeine because it triggers my myoclonus and my dystonia. So that's interesting too, that it just changes you as a person. And when I talk to people, some people are like, you talk very matter of fact and kind of unemotional about it, and here I'm crying for you. And I said, no, I have to take this and turn it into something positive. And again, I joke. I say, I have dyslexia, I have ADHD, I have depression, I have anxiety. Why not throw in a neurological disorder? Come on. And I have to be positive about it. And for me and for my sanity, know that I was given this to use it as an opportunity to help others. My dad, I grew up, he was a minister. My mom was a social worker. So I was raised that you need to be Christ-like and help people. You always reach out for the underdog. Yes, it can be debilitating at times, especially when I have a dystonic storm. It takes me basically 2 full weeks to recover from because my body is so worn out from it and it's very painful. But there's people who have that all day, every day. I can't pronounce all the different dystonias, but there's some that, it affects their vocal cords and they literally cannot speak. So I feel like I'm their voice. I need to help them. And then I was talking with Beth and we were talking about the research we want to propose to the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation. Like, we have ideas with females. A lot of the females I've talked to with dystonia, it becomes worse due to our hormones. So during ovulation, during menstruation, it becomes worse. So it trumps our medication. Our medication doesn't work during that time. And so we haven't really found much research about hormones and dystonia. And I keep, every neurologist I see, I tell them it gets worse during my hormones fluctuating. I also have scoliosis. Beth does too. And I know dystonia can cause scoliosis, but I'm also wondering if you're more predisposed to get dystonia if you already have scoliosis. So that's something I want to bring to the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation too, as well as the hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, because I don't think there's enough research with that too, because a lot of people with the HEDS or EDS also have dystonia. And unfortunately, I've come to learn that doctors are not educated about dystonia at all. And if they are, it is in regards to Parkinson's, Huntington's, and multiple sclerosis. So when there's a case like mine that kind of, quote unquote, comes out of the blue, they're baffled by it. And so I think more education needs to be done. So when I went to the educational seminar in Atlanta back in November of 2019, and my parents were kind enough to go with me to support me, and I raised my hand and said, what is being done to educate these doctors? Because my first neurologist just blew me off. My second neurologist, I think, was trying his best, but I already was checked out because he was in the process of moving, but he hadn't told anybody yet. My third neurologist straight out admitted that they are not taught this in depth. He said he went to a week-long, basically like convention, and that the professor that was going to talk about movement disorders said, be ready to feel like a fire hose is being shot to your face, because we are about to throw all this information at you, and you're most likely not going to remember it. And that's one reason I love Dr. Lee, is because he said he was right. They threw so much information at me, I didn't really remember it until I started working with my patients. And I get that because I'm a teacher. I was thrown tons of stuff when I was in college, even for my master's, and was like, wow, this is an overload. I don't know if I'm going to remember it all. And then it does start to kind of come back to you once you start to apply it. But I think more needs to be done. It shouldn't just be a week long, 5 days a week, 8-hour days learning about it. They need to also learn that it can happen outside of Parkinson's and Huntington's and MS. I had a Facebook account years ago. It was very overwhelming to me. So I started the Instagram account. It's been awesome meeting other people with dystonia, because there's this sense of kind of loneliness. It's been awesome to meet people from around the world or from a state next to me that has it, and just helping them and them helping me, and I feel less alone. It's been surprising how many people have contacted me privately saying, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, well, I'm no expert. And I mean, I've had it all my life apparently, and it's gotten worse, but I will tell you what I know, and I'm here to help you. And if you need to vent, by all means do. It has given me purpose. With me having depression most of my life, I always had to have purpose to stay alive, if that makes sense. That's what drove me to stay alive. And when I became a mom, gave me purpose. And now having dystonia, I feel like I have another purpose. And of course, I'm a teacher, so that gives me purpose. But that's one way I cope, is by helping others and wanting to educate others. And again, I'm learning so much about so many different things, and it's mind-blowing to me. I did not realize that if you have a disability or a chronic illness, to be able to continue to get funding, you have to advocate for it every single year, or you just don't get any money for research. So I was able to contact, with the help of Dan, my House of Representatives and my 2 senators, pleading to continue to fund research for dystonia. So again, that was very eye-opening to me, that it just doesn't roll over, because it's not like dystonia ends. It just doesn't stop just because the year's stopped or there's a new year beginning. So usually they actually go to Capitol Hill. They physically go there and talk to the senators and talk to Congress and talk to the House of Representatives. But because of COVID, they couldn't. Next year, if there's no COVID restrictions, I'm going to Capitol Hill, because again, I'm fortunate enough to be able to physically do that and have the means to do that and to speak for those who can't. It's interesting because I also have I think it's the medication, even though it's not a blood thinner, but I'm one of those 1%ers that I won't get the common side effects. I'll get the side effects that nobody knows about. And that's another reason I don't like taking medication, because doctors think I'm crazy when I come in there and I'm like, this is happening to me. And they're like, no. And I'm like, yes, it is. But now I'm like constantly cold. And I've also started to have like a chronic Charlie horse in my left calf muscle. It's just interesting how everything kind of snowballs. I told my husband, I said, I've never been a hypochondriac, and now I kind of feel like I am, and I'm not meaning to be, but everything's just it's just piling on me, and it's just so strange. So now I'm also, because my migraines, again, I mentioned earlier, have gotten more intense and frequent. So now I'm on a daily medication also to prevent my migraines, because I believe the first 3 dystonic storms I had migraines before. So then they were thinking also, well, maybe your migraines were putting so much pressure on your basal ganglia that it was causing you to have dystonic storms. But then we realized that wasn't necessarily true, because I was still, even after that, I was having dystonic storms without migraines. So again, it's just trying to figure out the triggers has been very interesting. The drug I'm on is considered a class C drug. A lot of us with dystonia are on medications that fall under that, and the government is making it extremely challenging for us to get it, because it's considered highly addictive, and there's people that use it just to use it and don't necessarily need it for medical reasons. So I'm only prescribed exactly what I need. Well, every morning I like to wake up and think that I'm cured, but then I realize, of course, I'm not. And my tremors are there. So it is very easy for me to accidentally, say, drop a pill down the sink, but I've learned to step away from the sink when I'm taking my medication, because if I accidentally lose some, they won't give me any extra at all because of the laws. And also I was frustrated because what if once Corona goes away, I would love to travel, since I'm off in the summer, since I'm a teacher, I would love to travel and meet some of these people, including you, like with dystonia, and just meet y'all. And how, if I decide to leave for a month or two, how would I get my medication? Like, I would have to jump through hoops for them to give me my medication, because apparently, again, there's people that are taking it that don't necessarily need it and are selling it or using it for their own personal use. So that's another thing I've been pondering in my head. I got a lot going on in there, obviously. Trying to figure all this out and how I can help people, because I know when I listen to Eugene's podcast that, and some of his posts on Instagram, he's been dealing with the same thing, that he just can't get the medication he needs because of the laws in Canada as well. So hopefully we can figure that all out as well, because I know there's some people who don't use it or don't need it or can work, their dystonia is manageable without it, where there's others of us who do need it until we find a cure to fix it. But I want to thank you, because I know you work full time, you have a beautiful family, you have Willow getting in your way.
Yeah.
That I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you. Take care, Lindsay.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much again to Lindsay for taking the time to share her journey, and to also just be there spreading awareness of dystonia with as many people as she can. It's truly inspiring. It's truly inspiring. So thank you so much. And Lindsay, I look forward to when we can have another chat. It would be absolutely amazing if one day we could all meet face to face. I know that there's a lot of us that would love to get together, so fingers crossed one day we'll be able to do that. If you'd like to be on the Warriors of Dystonia podcast, please do get in touch with me. You can either reach me at the website, which is warriorsofdystonia.wordpress.com, and you can also find me on both Instagram and Facebook. If you just do a search for Warriors of Dystonia, feel free to just shoot me a message, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you all the best.